Ladies and gents, PepperBelly here with some more Rainbow Six Siege, and in this video I want to talk about my proposition to Ubisoft. Even though it's not really directed at them, it's kind of just like my proposition in general of what I think would be a good game type, a good compromise to add to Rainbow Six Siege to appease a lot of the old-time fans without having to drastically change or alter anything in the game. And all it is implementing a classic mode. And let's get into the details, because classic mode is exactly as it sounds like. It's not going to be like most games where it's like, oh yeah, this is classic, and then it's not really classic. It's like, this is classic mode through and through. And what I want to do with this classic mode is basically replacing and getting rid of every single operator in the game. So if you go into classic mode, every single operator on the attacking team is the recruit. Meaning that every single person has access to all the weapons, all the gadgets, without these operator-specific special gadgets. So there are no special gadgets. This is just purely Rainbow Six to the bone. Like, this is just the most simplified Rainbow Six experience you can get. Of course, the gunplay and everything else is going to be exactly the same. The difference, however, is that there's not going to be any weird game-altering features based on the operator's special ability. Every single person, every single operator acts like an operator, traditionally, like most of the past Rainbow Six games. If you remember those games, every single operator you picked, they didn't have a specialty. Some of them, like, their specialties were in stats, you know? Some of the Rainbow Six operators would have, like, better accuracy, better endurance, stuff like that. But as for actual equipment, it was the same across the board. Everyone was able to pick whatever they wanted to use, and that's what I want to bring back. So basically, every single person is the recruit character, and they choose and pick whichever weapon they want. And every single weapon, including shields, is at your disposal. You get everything you can possibly want. And as for actual gadgets and kit, we want to make this as realistic as possible. So the two options you have as your gadget number one would be either you bring a breaching charge or you have a frag grenade. And your secondary gadget would either be a stun grenade or a smoke grenade. So that's it. That's all you get. You get your primary weapon, your secondary weapon, you get your first gadget, which is either a breaching charge or a frag grenade, and your secondary gadget being a stun grenade, which is a flashbang, or a smoke grenade. That's it. Now, you may be wondering why I am imposing restrictions on the attacker side, as in, like, you can't get a sledgehammer or you can't get any other methods of breaching. And the reason why is because there's not going to be any barricades. The defenders will not have any special abilities to block off doorways or reinforce walls. This completely changes the way the gameplay actually plays out, because now every single entry point is actually an entry point. You can't strategize and block off certain areas. You have to play within the actual natural environment, which is what every previous Rainbow Six game did. Of course, the environments back then weren't destructible, but at the same time, it's a trade-off of having frag grenades versus a breaching charge. And obviously you can have an entire team equip breaching charges and blow a hole in every single wall, but they do have means of ulterior motives of defense. The defending team can use the barricaded shield. They can use the razor wires that you lay down on the ground. So there is going to still be those gadgets. They still have their C4s. They have all the natural gadgets they have. They just have to pick and choose which ones they want, and they get access to two simultaneously. So if you wanted to use the barricade and the razor tripwire, or the razor wire, at the same time, you can do that. If you want to use C4 and the barricaded, like, you know what I mean? You can mix and match your equipment based on what you need for the mission. In addition to that, the difference here is that there's not going to be, like, you can't barricade up a doorway, because I want to have actual doors. I want to get rid of these boarded up doorway nonsense and replace it with real doors that open. This way, teams can actually stack up outside doors in a proper manner, throw flashbangs into the room, and clear it in a realistic way. The gameplay does allow for that. You know, the gameplay, even though it's arcadey, and it plays very much like Call of Duty, there still is the ability to perform in a tactical manner, although it's going to be, you know, mostly spray fests whenever you're engaging each other, but it will play more realistically than the current game types within Rainbow Six Siege right now with the operators that are in the game. Now, the one thing I didn't address was the actual look of the defenders. They need to look different, right? Because they're going to be using the same recruit style class as the attackers. The difference is they have to appear differently. So if you guys remember the E3 trailer from a long time ago for Rainbow Six Siege, they got everybody excited. That pretty much has nothing to do with the actual completed game now, other than the name. Yeah, well, basically, the terrorists in that game is exactly what they're going to look like. I want actual terrorist skins, them looking like proper terrorists. It's pretty simple. I mean, they already had the character models. I don't see why you can't implement it again for classic mode, give them actual terrorist look, in addition to them having the same recruit loadout structure that the attackers have, which is what I already talked about earlier in this video. And that's pretty much it. It is shit simple. It's basically just stripping all the things that make Rainbow Six Siege, and then kind of implementing minor changes that will ultimately change the overall flow of the game to play out in a more classic manner like traditional, old school Rainbow Six goodness, which is pretty much what a lot of us wanted. I mean, I've discussed many times over what this game was and is, how it's still enjoyable, but it's not what we wanted. And you can appease a lot of us simply by giving us that simple classic mode. It'll completely change the dynamic of the gameplay to fit more in line with a realistic, authentic portrayal of actual CQB operations, and that's exactly what a lot of us wanted. We don't want this, overly convoluted abilities to do strange things that is not exactly what operators would really do in the real world. You're not going to be sitting there using a Twitch, like a drone that can zap people. You're not going to be doing weird shit like that. Most of the time, it's going to be like proper entries. You're going in there with intent to kill the enemy and rescue the hostage or whatever the case may be. And speaking of hostages, to further enhance gameplay variation, I want to re-implement the ability to move the hostage as shown in the E3 trailer, because now things are different. Since you cannot reinforce a wall, you should be able to reposition that hostage to another vantage point if things get crazy or you need to just move around the map. It'll actually make moving through the map as a team, as the attackers, feel more tactical, having to deal with the fact that you got a mobile enemy and a critical asset whose life is in danger. You have to deal with that. And obviously, a one misplaced shot and you kill the hostage, it's game over and you totally screwed up your mission. I think, again, this would just be so much more fun. It's actually kind of humorous. I don't want to say this like I'm being cocky and full of my own idea, but I honestly think that if this was implemented as I kind of portray and think in my mind, and it plays out as well as I think it would, I think it would actually be way more popular than the base game of Rainbow Six Siege. I think people would kind of migrate to it and be like, wow, this is a way better experience than traditional, like the Rainbow Six Siege game itself. Like, you just impose those restrictions, that changes gameplay to be significantly more dynamic than the base game. It's going to completely change things. People will enjoy it. People will be sitting there thinking that this is a completely different experience within the same base game of what they purchased, which I would honestly prefer. Because let's be honest, a lot of what Rainbow Six Siege matches turn into is one team sitting down and hunkering in a room with the objective, and it's just a camp fest. They just sit there and they don't do anything because the objective is not mobile. You make that objective mobile, you make the ability for players to move the objective, and it completely changes the way things play out in a way that's a lot more interesting, right? You're going to be sitting there as the attackers moving in, they can move the hostage. What happens then? You got to deal with that somehow. You got to, on the fly, adapt and overcome, exactly like operators would in the real world. It makes you move around the map versus picking one spot on the map and then the defenders stay in that one spot. They can go anywhere they want. And that alone is kind of an exciting notion. I mean, most of the time, the attackers just move into the objective, they sit outside the walls that are reinforced and the doors that are barricaded, and then all the gameplay really is just assaulting that one room. You're not moving through the map really tactically, you're not watching all angles, unless there's roamers. You'll have the occasional player who's running around outside of the area. Those are called roamers, if you're not familiar. And they just simply, you have to deal with them as well. But the whole idea of a team sticking together, stacking up and moving along hallways properly, covering angles, someone's watching your six while someone's moving forward. People are covering the angles required to move into position so they can stack up on a door and make an entry. That doesn't happen right now. No one really does that. You kind of just all stand back from the wall, breach it, and then push in and, corner peek and do all this weird like zigzaggy side strafing thing to see if you can get the angle and then try to pop off the perfect headshot, and doesn't really play in a way that you would expect from an actual tactical shooter. So in my mind, I think this is a really good idea. I think it could be fun. You know, I'm looking at this, and the more I talk about it, the more excited I get. The more I would love to see this actually within Rainbow Six Siege, because that would actually completely bring me back from what I did not like about this game. And I would find an all-new respect for Ubisoft if they implemented something like this. They may not like it because they're obviously trying to go for a competitive scene. They want the game to be super competitive. They want to have it go into esports, and obviously having the operators and all that, you know, all those abilities and whatever is going to amplify the ability for it to be an esports type of competitive game. But most of us bought Rainbow Six because we want Rainbow Six. Of course, a lot of people knew what this game was because of the beta. A lot of people had access, so they knew what it was, and they still enjoyed it. Like I said, I still enjoy it, but I wouldn't want to buy it. If they had this simple game mode, I would buy it. That's the difference. You know, me being a traditional tactical shooter / military simulator fan, someone who takes this stuff very seriously, someone who loves the idea of really realistic and authentic games, this would actually inspire me to purchase it. My name's been PepperBelly. Thank you guys for joining me today on this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one.